When we least expect it, people show us their true colors, pretending to care and be invested in our lives only to further their own agendas, leaving us questioning our own judgment and sanity in the process. But beneath this facade lies a pattern of psychological desperation, a cry for validation, and a need for control, often masked as genuine interest. Have you ever found yourself in a conversation with someone who asks you increasingly invasive questions, or suddenly remembers to call you every few days after weeks of radio silence, only to drop the connection just as suddenly without a warning? In this video, we're going to delve into the unseen pattern of seeking validation through manipulation and explore why people pretend to care in order to maintain control, and what this says about the human condition. When we see people putting on a mask of empathy, often what lies beneath is a desperate need for validation and control. They are not invested in truly understanding, but rather in gaining an upper hand. In a twisted attempt to compensate for their own insecurities, individuals use fake displays of care to manipulate others, and in doing so, they temporarily boost their own ego and sense of self-importance. The problem is that beneath this veneer of concern, they are actually monitoring your vulnerabilities, studying your weaknesses, and waiting for the perfect moment to exploit them. In reality, people don't genuinely care about you, unless they have an ulterior motive. It's often a calculated attempt to gain your trust, and, subsequently, your surrender. What we're often observing when we see someone pretending to care is a form of self-deception. They think they are being compassionate and empathetic, when in reality, they are just trying to avoid their own sense of isolation and disconnection. At the root of their behavior, a deep-seated fear of being ignored or rejected drives individuals to fake empathy, and this fear can be so overwhelming that it eclipses any semblance of genuine concern for others. When we seek validation from others, we're often not looking for genuine connection, but rather a means to shore up our own fragile sense of self-worth. The people who need to manipulate others the most are usually those struggling to convince themselves of their own value. Their attempts to control and persuade are a thinly veiled attempt to distract from their own deep-seated insecurities. In reality, manipulation has nothing to do with love or care. It's about feeding an insatiable ego that craves attention and admiration. We've all been drawn to charismatic manipulators at some point, and it's not because they are charming, but because they are adept at stimulating our own insecurities, playing into our deepest fears, and exploiting our desire for validation. The irony is that while they are trying to control our emotions and perceptions, they are secretly terrified of losing control over their own. It's a pathetic cycle of fear and self-deception that drives them to continue their game of manipulation. As we dive into the complex dynamics of manipulation, it's crucial to understand that beneath the facade of emotional connection lies a profound desire for validation and control. When someone consistently seeks to pretend they care about you only to further their own agenda, it's not about building a genuine relationship. It's about establishing a sense of ownership and power over the other person. A telltale sign of manipulation is the constant need for reassurance, not because the person genuinely cares, but because their own sense of self-worth is deeply tied to your validation. What starts as an attempt to attract someone through displays of interest can easily morph into a tactic to maintain control, particularly if that person harbors deep-seated insecurities or fear of abandonment. The more you attempt to please someone who's manipulating you, the more they'll see you as a means to fuel their ego, a pawn in their game of power and control. At its core, manipulation is a desperate cry for validation, often hiding behind a veil of false intimacy, but what it reveals is the true extent of one's own self-deception. Behind the charade of manufactured relationships and pretended affection lies a profound hunger for validation, a desperate cry for acceptance that echoes through the chambers of an insecure and frightened ego. The allure of power stems not from the power itself, but from the validation it promises, a fleeting sense of importance that can never truly satiate the void within, but still we pursue it. Manipulation is a subtle yet insidious dance, where the orchestrator pretends to care, all the while feeding the ego's insatiable appetite for control and validation, leaving the other to wonder why they are stuck in this toxic loop. In the game of power and control, our vulnerabilities are exploited, our insecurities leveraged, and our fears manipulated, all to keep us bound to the whims of those who've learned to play this dark and twisted game. The greatest lie we tell ourselves is that our actions are driven by love or care, when in truth, we're merely seeking validation, a desperate attempt to prove our worth, our relevance, and our control in a world that often seems indifferent to our existence. The more we manipulate others to feed our own self-deception, the further we're driven from true connection, true love, and true validation, which can only be found when we dare to let go of the need to control and instead risk being vulnerable and genuinely exposed. When someone in our lives is using manipulation to get our validation, it's often masked as concern or care, but what they are truly seeking is power and control over us. A common sign of manipulative behavior is when the person becomes excessively invested in every aspect of your life, constantly needing to know what you're doing and with whom you're doing it, as a way to exert emotional control. The root of their need for control often lies in their deep-seated insecurity and fear of being abandoned or replaced, which they attempt to alleviate by making us dependent on them. We mistakenly attribute their behavior to genuine affection when in reality, they are using our desire for connection and belonging to maintain a false sense of intimacy and keep us enthralled. Manipulative individuals often engage in a psychological pattern known as love bombing, where they shower us with excessive attention and affection in the beginning of a relationship, making us feel seen and valued. But this is just a tactic to hook us in and make us vulnerable to future manipulation. The line between love and possession can become blurred when someone uses manipulation to keep you in a relationship, making it difficult for you to distinguish between their genuine feelings for you and their need to maintain control over your life and emotions. Today, we explored the unseen pattern of seeking validation through manipulation, where people pretend to care to maintain control over others. I hope this video helped you gain insight into the complex dynamics of human behavior and the tactics we use to navigate relationships. If you found this topic thought-provoking, hit like, share your personal observation in the comments below, and subscribe for more in-depth content on human psychology.